Hi, I'm Simon, and this is The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you're new here, subscribe to get notification of new videos like this one so you don't miss out on any news. And all the links to everything I talk about in this video, including any gear discussed, are placed in the description down below. But before I get into today's question and answer session, just a reminder that I'm giving away this Canon 50mm EF 1.8 STM lens. If you'd like a chance to win, simply subscribe to my channel. That's it. I do have more information about the contest in the description down below. So here we are, another week later, and I've got even more questions from you guys to answer. So I'm going to try to get through as many as I can, but I'm trying to keep these to between 30 and 40 minutes. Part of that is I'm shooting outside and the sun is going to change over the course of that hour, so I want to make sure that the lighting just doesn't go bizarre towards the end. That's the advantage of shooting indoors. You have a studio, you don't have to worry about lighting, you don't have to worry about changing audio levels, air conditioners coming on, and the like. So I want to keep shooting these question and answer sessions outdoors, but there are some challenges. All right, so let's get to our first question. Our first question is from Innovation. Innovation asks, do you think that they will ever make a durable mirrorless camera like the 1DX Mark II that can be used basically in all weather conditions? Or is that a trade-off of having this new technology that'll always be less reliable in that way? Okay, there's a couple of things to unpack here. First of all, Canon doesn't make a weatherproof camera. They just simply don't. If you get moisture inside your camera, if you damage it due to weather, they're not going to warranty that. However, they use a term called weather resistant. So they try to make it so it's less permeable to water and moisture and getting in. And it's kind of strange. My iPhone has IP68, I believe, so it can be submerged in water for up to 2 meters for about 30 minutes. Now again, if it gets water damage, that's on me. But these cameras aren't made to the same degree. If you drop them, they're going to get damaged, but if you take them in mist or rain, then they should hold up. And you can see lots of videos online where these things are put through really, really tough conditions. They're drenched with water, they're frozen, and they survive. But there is no guarantee. Now the 1DX Mark III is one of the best sealed cameras that Canon makes, followed by the 5 series, the 5D Mark IV, and of course the R5 is going to be the equivalent there. Now that doesn't mean if you spend less you're not going to get any sort of weather resistance or weatherproofing. The 90D has some sort of weather resistance in it, and I certainly expect that the R6 will too. While it's cheaper than the R5, at somewhere around $2,300 to $2,500 US, that's still an awful lot of money for a body, so I do expect it's going to have some sort of weather sealing. German asks, is the RF mount weak against the Sony E mount because it's fairly new and expensive? How important do you think third-party manufacturers are to position a new mount? Well, there's a couple of things going on here, German. So one is, do you think that third-party manufacturers have an impact? And I say yes, they definitely do. It's competition. What that means is we can get lower prices, and let's be honest, the RF mount, I wouldn't say all the lenses, you can get lenses for $399, but the majority of the lenses coming out for the RF mount are very, very expensive. Not as expensive as the Leica lenses, but still quite expensive. So bringing Sigma on board, and yes, Sigma has, there is a rumor that Sigma is going to be releasing lenses for the Canon RF mount. An announcement is coming soon. I don't know if we're getting lenses this year or next year. Canon Rumors yesterday did tease a piece saying that they're coming out with some new lenses for Sony, and they might also be announcing for Canon, but there's no promises. But let's take a look at the other side of things. That there aren't a lot of lenses for the RF mount, and I'd say that's definitely not correct at all. Because Canon makes this adapter, this $100 adapter, you can get the $200 adapter with the extra ring, but you're looking at $100 and you can snap on up to 107 EF lenses, or EF and EFS lenses. And that's a lot of lenses, that's a lot of focal lengths. So I think the real thing you need to be looking at if you're going into the RF platform is Canon serious about it? And yes, they are. They've produced, I think, 11 lenses in the last year or year and a half, and that's a pretty serious commitment. They've even come out and said that their focus is on the RF mount. Now, if you don't find the focal lengths you're looking for there, but you find them on the EF or the the EFL series, that's where I'd be focusing my attention. I wouldn't get the EFS lenses because you're going to get that crop factor and they're not weather resistant. And EFM, that's for their APS-C mount, and that doesn't carry over at all. So look at the newer ones, especially if you're doing video. You want, for example, the 24 to 105 f4 Version 2 is silent. It's perfect for video, but the earlier version, it's quite loud, but it's fine for photography. So you really need to identify what your needs are, what focal lengths you need, and if you've got a focal length that they just don't have on the RF mount, but they have on the EF, well then get that lens, get the adapter, and bring it over. It's kind of a strange question in a way, because you've got to ask yourself, what is your viewpoint, what is your perspective? And if I'm a Sony person right now, yes, I can say, look, I can get all the focal lengths that I need, but I've got to deal with that. I mean, the E-mount, for example, is built for APS-C, and every full-frame lens has that little adapter on the end of it, which is kind of annoying, but does that affect your quality? Every camera manufacturer has issues or quirks with their stuff. Let's take a look at Panasonic. Panasonic has over 28 or around 28 lenses, somewhere under 30 lenses in just a year since they announced the S1 and the S1R, and that's pretty staggering. But that's partly due to the third-party lenses that are available. And I guess I said that wrong. It's not the third-party lenses, it's the L-mount alliance. So you've got 3 different companies making lenses for that. You've got Leica, Panasonic, and Sigma. So that's really huge. So yeah, third-party does matter, but like I say with in all my videos, it's really about the capabilities you're looking for. Identify what the capabilities you need out of the camera, including the lenses, and see what is available, and then pick the best camera for your workflow. Daga asks, do you think Sigma will start producing lenses for the RF soon? Sure, Canon has great glass, but I find their prices a tad high for us ordinary filmmakers. It's a great question, and as you can tell, I kind of leaked that in the previous question. So the answer is yes. I do believe that Sigma is going to make an announcement soon, and they are going to start making glass for the RF mount. A Soldier asks, how many megapixels do you actually need for quality prints? I think for the ordinary filmmaker, you really don't need more than about 20 megapixels. And this is a great question. It's almost as though you've heard my videos and say, yes, Simon, but what can I produce? What can I print off with good quality using a 20 megapixel sensor, for example? I love this image here because it's a very simple graphic that really helps us understand what amount of megapixels we need for each print size. So for example, and I'm going to ignore all the yellow and red because it's not ideal. It's not the best you're going to get. And really, no matter whether we're doing amateur or not, we still want really good detail. We don't want anybody to look at it and say, well, it doesn't look so good. So here we go. If we look at 5x7 and 8x10s, and you know, I'm printing mostly 4x6s, but 8x10, you can do, an 8 megapixel camera is more than sufficient to do an 8x10. Think about that for a minute here. That's an 8x10. That's pretty big. It's about the size of a standard piece of 8.5x11 paper. It's pretty good size. So even an 8 megapixel camera can do that, and a 20 megapixel camera isn't big enough. And that's why I've been arguing all along that for the ordinary filmmaker and photographer, 20 pixels is more than enough, and I'd even be happy with 16 megapixels. So with 18 megapixels, what we can see here with this image is that we can easily go to 11x14. That's pretty good. Now, yes, with the R5, we can go all the way up to 16x24, but I can't imagine any of us ordinary filmmakers are going to need something that big. And if we do need to blow something up to poster size, well, in most cases, it's a poster. Any posters we look at aren't really high in detail. You're going to lose some sort of detail, and that's usually forgivable at that point. So this is a great chart. Use this chart. It's ideal for helping you understand what amount of megapixels you need to produce a really detailed or decent level print. Do you think Canon will embrace 5G and Wi-Fi 6 to fully deploy cloud services and potentially non-destructive computational photography? Sony, others. Frosty, once again, you've asked a fabulous question. Yes, the answer is, but like with a lot of your questions, we can scratch down and get deep into this. By hooking your camera up with Wi-Fi or wireless, you're essentially connecting to the internet. Now you're in the realm of the Internet of Things, and there's a lot going on here. There's many different layers. And if we look at this image here, we can quite simply see that, yes, we have the device layer, we have the interfaces, we have how the technology actually works, we have the procedures, the protocols, and all that kind of stuff. But then we also have the communication layer, the information layer, function layer, and process layer. What's really important to unpack here is it's not as simple as just adding Wi-Fi or wireless to the camera. It's the entire infrastructure. It's the software, it's the hardware, and it's the future roadmap on how Canon plans on growing this. So this is very, very important to the future. We do need that speed to be able to get information off the cameras, but it also has to be done right. We have to have the right security in place. We have to have the right protections. The last thing we want to do is somebody interrupt our stream and take control of our images or even wipe them out. So it does involve a lot of careful thinking on the back end, and unlike computers, cameras don't update as frequently. Sony was pretty good at updating them every couple of years or so, but some Canon cameras don't get updated, I think it's every 4 years? So they also need to think about how they design the firmware, how they allow some of these things to be updated more frequently. And you can update the firmware, but you can't update the hardware. So that is a bit of a challenge on the technical side. So again, Frosty, a really good question. Luke asks, can I pre-order from Canon themselves, or do I have to pick a store to pre-order from? If I pre-order from a store, what type of store should I be looking for? Luke, we're going to know in a couple of days. Come July the 9th, Canon's going to make an announcement. We're most likely going to have the opportunity to pre-order at that point. And it's really up to you. So if you pre-order from Canon, you're ordering directly from Canon. If you go through a retailer, then what's happening is that retailer is going to be allocated a certain amount of kit right at the beginning, and the first people to get that kit will get a camera sent out. What do you prefer? It's really deep. Do you have a point system with a company you're dealing with? Do you have a relationship with that company? Some companies might be giving commercial discounts. I know this camera is new, and I know you're thinking, nah, they're not going to offer discounts, but yes, discounts are out there. I can tell you that. I've been talking to a couple through commercial contracts, and there are discounts to be had, especially if you're a long-time customer, if you're buying a lot of kit. They're going to want to keep you happy. So you've really got to look at all the different options. At this point, I'm already on a waiting list at a couple of local camera stores in Toronto. But come July the 9th, once the announcement's made, I'll probably follow up with those two stores, see what's going on, when they expect stock in. And more or less, Canon's going to tell us in the July 9th announcement at 8 a.m. in the morning, this is when you'll be able to get the cameras. You're not going to get them any sooner. So it's really kind of up to you. I would just avoid, one thing I would avoid, regardless of the camera store you deal with, any camera store that asks you to pay for the full amount up front, I would walk away from that. The economy is not the greatest right now, and if that company falls, that's a lot of money you're parting with. So if they want a deposit of $100 or two, fine. But you know, I would not be putting down a lot of money. I wouldn't be putting down $1,000 or anything like that for this, because you know what? Canon's going to want to make money. They're going to start shipping these as quickly as possible. It's just like Apple in the past, and I used to, especially in the early days of the iPad, because it was something very important to my workflow, I would buy a new one whenever it came out, up until I think version 3 or 4. And I never did lineups. And sure enough, you know, I could go in the store on the day of or a few days later and get a unit. I wasn't going to do that lineup or pay an exorbitant amount to people who got first dibs. So just be careful with that. Don't put a ton of money down. But whether you get it through Canon or your retailer, go with what your gut tells you. Go with what you're most comfortable with. Jacob asks, I've been shooting on a Canon T6i for almost 4 years and want to upgrade to a full-frame camera. I mainly do portrait, fashion, and street photography. Based on the specs of all Canon's EOS R, R5, and R6 cameras, which one might be right for me? Well, if you've already watched the video from the beginning, you'll see I had a question earlier in terms of what megapixels you need to be able to produce, 8x10s, for example, and even an 8 megapixel camera can do that. So what you've got to ask yourself is, how do you want to grow? What other features do you want? So the EOS R is going to be more than capable enough of doing fashion photography in terms of the detail and the quality for the prints. You're going to get really good results. But you're limited to, I think, 30 megapixels, which is pretty good. But what is the buffer size? What speed do you need? The EOS R with continuous autofocus is not a fast camera. If you actually snap a couple of seconds of photos and you look at the actual ones that are in focus, you're going to get maybe 3 frames per second by the time you're done. And so if that speed matters, I'd be looking more towards the R6 or the R5. Now, I can't tell you which one's going to be better for you at this point because we don't have enough specifications from Canon detailing what photography specs that they have. Yes, 12 frames per second mechanical, 20 frames per second electronic, dual SD card slots, but that doesn't get us into the details enough. What is the buffer like? Now, what I can tell you is that the R5 is a 5 series camera. So if you really like the 5D Mark IV and you really want to get serious about this, then the R5, you certainly can't go wrong with it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the R6, and if you don't need high frame rate, so maybe the EOS R might be the best camera for you and can be had for under $1,500 very shortly. Indy asks, Simon, on reflection of all the moves the various camera companies have done over the last 6 months, what is your prediction for the next 6 months? Also, who's going to do what in response to Canon's move? Indy, that's a good question. I think we have a pretty good idea of what Canon's got planned for the next 6 months. The R5 and the R6 are a big part to jumpstart the RF platform. These are two cameras that they've really been dominating the news cycle, especially on this channel over the last, I guess, 5-6 months now. Canon's been carefully orchestrating, carefully leaking information about these cameras, and everything we've heard so far has been backed up by what Canon has come out and stated. So I think we have a pretty clear idea of what Canon's coming out with. Now, if I revisit some of the rumors from the past, there's supposed to be an M5 Mark II coming out this year. There's also supposed to be 2 RF cameras. There's supposed to be a low-budget version, kind of like an RP, but the RP and the EOS R are kind of one-offs. It's not going to be an EOS RP Mark II. It's going to be aimed at the lower end of the budget. It's going to be around $1,000 or less. But we don't know in terms of what features. And then, of course, there's the high megapixel version of the R5. I don't know if Canon's going to drop those in the next 6 months, but those are what we're expecting next. Now, in terms of what other camera companies do, well, most of these camera companies already have a roadmap in place, and they're going to keep going ahead with that. Now, depending on what Canon does, if Canon comes out and does something that's completely market changing, like Apple has done in the past with the iPhone, that really disrupted the market. So if Canon comes out with something that disrupts the market, like if this 8K is really solid and it doesn't have silly record times of a minute or something, if it's a real disruptor, then yes, those camera companies are going to go back, they're going to look at their roadmap and see how they can adapt and make changes. But if I'm a Sony customer, if I'm a Panasonic customer, I've got the S1H or I've got the a7 III, am I going to jump to Canon? Probably not, because I've got a good set of glass, and I'm probably looking for the the a7 IV or the a7S III. It doesn't have to be as good as Canon in all capabilities. It has to meet the capabilities that I'm looking for, and I think even today I'd be very happy with an a7 III. So I don't think it's really going to change it for the consumers too much, not in the short term. In the long term, if Canon does something that really disrupts, and it might not be any one feature, but it's the amount of features into the camera, well, then, yes, that is going to make a difference long term because it heats up the competition, and Sony's going to want to get part of that, especially with this market that's slowly decreasing like this. There's going to be a fight to be in the top 3 places because those companies, the ones in the top 3, are going to be the ones that are going to survive. And I think it's going to be definitely Sony and Canon. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below who you think is going to survive. I hope you guys aren't hearing the garbage trucks going by. I've paused the video so I could let them go by, but they're still in the background, and hopefully this Tascam is doing a really good job of filtering it out. It's Saturday. Garbage day is normally Friday for us, but because Wednesday was Canada Day, our national holiday, garbage pickup was delayed. So now I'm having to not only worry about how quickly the sun's moving around, it's kind of like one of those sci-fi movies, right? Once the sun hits, you're in trouble, and I am. As soon as the sun hits, it's going to completely blow up my exposure levels and everything, so I have to get this wrapped up within a certain amount of time. But I also have to watch out for the garbage trucks because they do make a lot of sound. So hopefully, in post, the sound is going to be pretty good and pretty sufficient. Sufficient, that doesn't make any sense. The sound is going to be good. It's going to be okay. That's better, right? Yeah. Montana says, yesterday a bride contacted me through Facebook and wanted me to shoot her wedding for $200 because, as she put it, other things ran more than what she budgeted for. I turned her down. With the new mirrorless and HSS tech blazing a trail for the future of photography and videography, aren't we going to have to adopt a sustainable price for the future of our business? Yes, we are. And you know what? The market is going to correct itself. I wouldn't take that job for $200 either. Just when you take into account your time, weddings are not a couple of hour job. They're a full day job. So you're putting all your day in, you've got your equipment, and then you've got the work that you do afterwards. So $200 is not a lot of money. And yes, there are going to be some kids, some people starting out that are going to take these jobs just to get the experience. And if you're looking at doing a wedding and you're willing to offer somebody $200 for photos, just realize you're going to get people to do it, but you're not going to get people who understand bokeh, that understand lighting as well. They're relatively new, and you're probably not going to get the best quality. You might luck out, you might get some really good jobs, but just keep that in mind. The old adage, you pay what you get what you pay for, stands the test of time. So one of a couple of things is going to happen, you know, and I'm sure this happens throughout time. When I was younger, I would take jobs for much cheaper just to get myself in the door. But if enough people start taking these jobs for $200, or enough people start shooting their weddings with iPhones and other cameras, then it's just going to further reduce the amount of people in the market. And as professionals, we have to look at, if this market is contracting enough, what other forms of business can we get into? So yeah, I know, and it's a tough time, and it's got to be disheartening when you see somebody actually having the nerve to say, yeah, I can do it for 200. The only thing I could think of doing in return, instead of just outright turning it down, saying, you know, I'm going to be there full day, I just cannot make money off this, I can do it for this price, but that's as low as I can go, and just leave it at that. Junks asks, what specs would Sony need on the a7S III to impress you? I'm going to change the question a little bit, because I don't really care about the specs so much. I care about the outcomes, the results, the why behind what it is I'm trying to do. And specs can get you into trouble. About 8 years ago, I went into Best Buy to buy a video camera because I was going to propose to my wife, and I thought it'd be kind of good to capture that on film. I asked the guy, does it produce 1080? And, you know, I wasn't thinking as right. I got a lot of things on my mind, and he says, yes, it does. And I didn't know about video because I was shooting photos, right? How many of us are still there now, still just shooting photos? So I took it, and it was terrible. If I just moved it a little bit, it's like the whole thing kind of ghosted a bit, and it was just absolutely terrible. So I returned it the following day, went to my local camera store and said, look, I'm looking for a camera that can do really good video. What do you recommend? They asked me a few questions. I had a Canon. They said, well, why don't you go with the 70D? I said, does it produce really good video, though? What's the autofocus? He says, no, it's really good. It just came out. And I'm very, very happy with it. I'm still shooting with it today. It's a great camera. The detail isn't there now today in 2020, but it's an awesome camera. And so I would really phrase it as, what will the a7S III give me? Now, I see it as a photocentric camera, so I expect it to be really good in low light. I expect it to be really good in any lighting situation. What I want from a camera is a camera that helps me reduce the amount of time I spend with my workflow. So anything that can help me with that end, with that goal, matters a lot to me. And that could be half a dozen different features working together. It could be low light performance, it could be the sensor, it could be other specs. It's not about having a 45 megapixel sensor, and that's why I said before, you know, anywhere from between 16 and 20 megapixels is perfect for me. So it's the real outcomes that I'm looking for, and I know there's been a little bit of debate about the a7S III, and now that we know it's coming out, I expect that it's not going to be 8K, it's not going to beat the R5 in certain areas, and I don't expect it to be. I see it more in direct competition with the R6, and I really expect low light to come into play, dynamic range. I'm really curious to see if they will even try to tap into what some of the cinema cameras can do. That's really what makes a difference. And also, can these cameras function very well as B-roll cameras? You know, if they're small enough, you can strap these inside cars. So one of my favorite television shows is Top Gear / The Grand Tour. And, you know, if you want to learn how to film, I think these are perfect examples of TV shows that know how to shoot, that know how to edit, know how to grade, know how to provide score. And when you're working in smaller spaces, to be able to just sort of, you know, tape these cameras up into a car or some other tight space as B-roll cameras, they produce really, really good results. So I'm not going to get into the spec details because this is not a spec war. I don't think that really matters. It's more the outcomes. And come July the 9th, which is just a few days away, well, more than a few, it's on Thursday, I'm really going to be looking to see, well, how does this improve my workflow? How does this improve the quality of my output? And I think that's far more important. So I'm not dancing around the question. I'm trying to change the focus away from specs, because specs will get you into trouble every time. And it's what the salesmen will sell you on. You try to talk to a salesman, I challenge you this, go to a store, talk to a salesman, and ask them about the capabilities a camera provides. And these are outcomes, these are results. And it's a different conversation. They'll start talking about the specs again, and you've got to bring them back to the specification, because that's what matters. Sorry, bring them back to the capabilities, because that's what matters to us. It's the end result every day. Shrijan asks, If Canon nails 8K perfectly, will it mean that the old 2.7K or 1080p cinema cameras will be reduced in price significantly? I know the dynamic range and data rate is better in cine cameras, but if Canon can get 8K on such a small body, then they can definitely get 4K with 18 stops of dynamic range on a same sized body. Simple answer, no. I don't believe that the R5 in any way is going to cause a significant drop in the sales of cine cameras, or as a result, cause a significant drop in price. You got to remember that cine cameras, they cost, yes, a lot more, but the results are really good. It's not just about dynamic range. It's not just about low light. It's about go anywhere, durable, 8 hours a day of filming at least, just solid go anywhere cameras specifically built for broadcasting, cinema. You can easily hook these things up through a couple of cables, and now you're broadcasting live. And yes, you can with the R5 too, but I'm talking about television. Television has very specific standards. With YouTube, if you punch the audio up a little bit, or you punch the colors up a little bit, no big deal. But if you do that with broadcast, bad things can happen. So I really don't think that's going to happen. The R5, the R6, these are hybrid cameras, and while they might do 8K very well, and it's really good for some of us getting into filmmaking, I don't think it's going to change. Now, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, man. Who knows? Maybe Canon does a really good job here, and just the market goes, I'm going to get a bunch of these instead of a C300. Or instead of getting three C300s, three of them, I'm going to get one C300 and a couple of R5s. I mean, that's possible. I really don't know, but Canon's a type of company, I really don't see them cannibalizing their lines, and as a professional, I really couldn't see myself using a bunch of R5s in place of a C300 as my A-roll camera. I just don't see that happening. Michael says, I'm still searching for my next body, and I want to upgrade from my 80D M50 to full frame. I'm strictly a travel landscape city style shooting. So what would be my best compromise? R6, RP, or EOS R? Video isn't that important to me, maybe 10%. Well, Michael, that's a terrific question, and I'm going to make some assumptions here. Since you're going down to the RP, then obviously it sounds like price and budget might be a bit of a factor in this as well. I wouldn't go with the RP. What I would do is I would go with the R, and the reason being is the RP and the R are going to start coming down a bit more in price. I believe that Canon's going to be dropping the price around August, and they're going to be dropping it to around $1,500, and that's new. You can get them cheaper used, and you're going to get that much better results out of it. You're going to have better video qualities, and you're going to have better photo capabilities. The EOS R is a 30 megapixel camera. It's essentially the 5D Mark IV in mirrorless form for a fraction of the price. I think the 5D Mark IV, what does it go for now? Is around $2,000 or something like that. So it's still more expensive than the EOS R. So yes, the 5D Mark IV will give you better frame rates, but the EOS R, I think, is going to be a much better value camera there. Now, do you need faster than about 3 frames per second continuous shooting? If you do, then you're going to have to go up to the R6 or the R5. But if you're fine with 3 frames per second, you don't need an improvement in dynamic range or low light, then you might be very, very happy with the EOS R. So I'd look at the EOS R instead of the RP. And based on the questions I just gave you, or the considerations, then, you know, consider the R5 and the R6 if it doesn't meet your frames per second requirement, or if it's not good in low light or dynamic range or some of those other things. Films in My Blood asks, what do you think of the Nikon Z6? Do you think indie filmmakers should look at the R6, or do you recommend some other options? What do I think of the Z6, the Nikon Z6? I think it's a great camera. For video, I think it does a great job. For photo, it does a great job. And it has separate photo and video settings. It has 4K oversampling. If you gave me a choice between the Z6, the EOS R, and the RP, I'd go with the Z6 and without a hands down. I think it's a great camera. I think it's very capable of video. But if you ask, well, what about the R6? And I think, yes, you asked about the R6. What about the R6? I would wait until July the 9th to know for sure, but from what I can see in the R6, 4K 60 with incredible autofocus. You've got eye autofocus, you've got head autofocus. So that means it'll lock on your face because it's got face detection, it's got eye detection. But once you turn your head like this, or even further, I'm not going to do a poltergeist thing and turn my head all the way around. cameras have trouble, and this Canon will have trouble too. It doesn't know what to lock on anymore. And so now the new autofocus allows you to lock onto the head as well, and that's really, really cool. It's very important. It's also a generation newer than the Z6. What else does it do? It does 180 frames per second in 1080. It has 10-bit, and I believe it's 422. It's got 10-bit, I believe it's 422. I believe it's going to have H.265. It's very rare for a camera to come out with 4K and not offer H.265. So, you know, wait for the announcement to see what the specifications are for sure. Now, if you have a whole bunch of Nikon glass and you're with Nikon, then stick with Nikon. I think the Z6 is a great camera. Nikon's going to be coming out with a Z5 and a Z8 recently, shortly, I believe, probably after Sony's announcement. And I expect the Z8 to be more along the lines of the 5D Mark IV or the R5. And we'll just have to wait and see on that. But yeah, I think the Z6 is a great camera. Now, if you're completely looking at a new camera and you're not married to any platform, wait till July the 9th. The Z6 came out a year ago, I believe. The R6 is newer, and generally what you expect with newer is to be a little bit better than what was in the past. So wait to see, and then compare the capabilities and purchase the camera, an ecosystem that you think is best suited to meet your capabilities. Jimmy asks, is Panasonic screwed if the GH6 flops? The market's been in free fall since 2013 for DSLR type cameras. Olympus has just spun off their camera division, and I don't think they're going to be the last. I think we're going to see more mergers and acquisitions. If this doesn't go well for Panasonic, if the GH6 doesn't go well, then I think they're going to be in trouble. If the R5 is truly as good as people are hoping it to be, and Canon's leaking it to be, then I think the S1H could be in trouble too. I mean, you look at the S1H, it's this huge camera, it produces incredible results, but if the R5 can beat it, being a smaller body without venting, which I got to wait and see. I got to wait and see the capabilities. Then I have to say, I think, yeah, Panasonic's going to be in trouble. Panasonic is a large multinational conglomerate, but in this global economic situation, they got to be looking across their entire lines of business, and they got to be looking at sustainability. How do they keep their business going? So if Panasonic cameras isn't doing very well, then they could choose to spin it off. They could choose to exit the market, so to speak. So I do believe that a failure of the GH6 could hurt them, but I also believe that if the GH6 does really well, let's say they fix their autofocus, and I really hope they do. The G100 in their promotional stuff, they say, look, we know we've had problems with our focus in the past, but we've fixed it. I'll have to wait to see that to believe it, because I have never seen contrast detect autofocus work. Phase detect is the way to go. Everyone's using phase detect except Panasonic. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, short answer to your question, if the GH6 flops, it's certainly not helping Panasonic. It's just one more nail in that coffin, so to speak. Critical Thinking asks, between the new 6K cropped, potentially 8K cameras entering the market, which ones are more practical? After all, can you still call a documentary 4K if you crop in at times during interviews that's filmed in 4K? Again, this is another one of those open-ended questions, and it really depends on your capabilities. You really got to spend some time to think of what is your vision, what are you trying to do with your business, with your hobby, what capabilities matter to you most, and then that will help determine what is practical. At one point, I was looking at buying the Panasonic HC-X1, I believe it's called, or X2, I can't remember which one, but it's a pretty hulking big camera. It met all the capabilities, and then right at the end, my wife asked me a question, and I really thought about it, and I was like, this thing's too big. Traveling with it, forget about it. Walking down the park with my son, it wasn't practical. Capability-wise, it was practical, but I'd overlooked one simple thing. It's just huge. So you really got to come up with your own capabilities, really think about it. Now, in terms of documentaries, I'm a little bit old school when it comes to documentaries. I don't believe that documentaries should have a soundtrack to them. I don't believe that they should use aggressive cutting or strange camera pans. Anything to help draw the audience to a conclusion. Anything to help stir the emotion. Because I think a documentary should try to be as open and honest as it can. And using those techniques kind of really bug me. I think Nova does a really good job. They do bring in some music, but it doesn't tweak things too much. There was a TV show last year, UFO America's Investigation to UFOs, where they look into those Pentagon released images of the fighter jets chasing these unknown aerial phenomena. And I watched that, and I didn't really, I thought it was along the lines of Ancient Aliens. I didn't really think it was a documentary, but it's classified as a documentary, and I watched it again, and yes, it is a documentary. But the way they use music in there, I think that's unfair. That leads a person in the wrong direction. So when you talk about edits, if you shoot in 4K and you crop in a little bit, no, I don't think it's cheating. It's how you do it. Do you do it in a gimmicky way? If you shoot in 4K and then you crop in a little bit, you bounce out. With documentaries, keep it simple. It's about the story. It's about your subject. It's not about the editing. Keep it simple editing. Don't let it get in the way. And before I get into my last question from Jonathan Guy, a quick shout out to Peter Gregg. And the reason I remembered that shout out now is because Jonathan also frequents Peter Gregg. Now, Peter Gregg, he does video reviews, camera reviews, but he also does a live stream every Friday around 9 or 10 p.m. And one thing I like about Peter's style is if I've had a rough or stressful day, whatever it is that Peter's talking about, I always feel more relaxed and better afterwards. He's just got that presence about himself. He doesn't take himself too seriously, and I really appreciate that. But the one thing he does, and Jonathan can attest to this, is he likes to hide a Windex bottle somewhere in his frame. I don't know how this started. Maybe he left it out during one session and people said, there's a Windex bottle, and it started. I don't know. You'd have to ask Peter. But what I did as a bit of a shout out to Peter is I've hidden a Windex bottle somewhere in this frame. Can you guys spot it? If so, drop the comment or drop your... I can't speak. After about 40 minutes, I can't speak. Go ahead in the comment section down below. Tell me where it is, but be detailed and be specific. And the first person to completely identify where it is wins my congratulations and heartfelt thanks. So this is the end of this video. I'm going to be doing these on a weekly basis now. It seems I'm getting an awful lot of questions from you guys. And I had 18, 19 answered in this one, and I had plenty more that I didn't have enough time to get to. So I'm going to make this a weekly event. I'm going to shoot it outdoors, whether it's summer or winter, and that will be a bit of a challenge for me. I guess I'll have to start using gloves and whatnot in the winter. But I enjoy this. I wish I could do this live with you guys, but I just don't have the equipment, and I really don't want to get into live. I think this is far more effective. So thanks for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. Don't forget to subscribe for your chance to win this Canon 50mm f1.8 lens. And also don't forget, on July the 9th at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. British time, and I think it's 2 p.m. Central European Time, we are going to be getting Canon's live stream simultaneous announcement of the R5 and R6. Thanks again for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. All equipment used and notes are placed in the description box, show more box, or down arrow thingy next to the title on the mobile app.